Holy shit. Let me tell you about the most insane economic power shift that just happened, and 99% of people have no idea it even occurred. American cattle ranchers woke up one morning thinking they were about to have their best quarter in years. $1.2 billion worth of contracts. Done deal. Trucks loaded. Cold storage maxed out in Texas, Nebraska, Kansas. Multi-generational family businesses counting down to payday. Then Canada just ghosted them. Not delayed the shipments. Not renegotiated. Just straight up said nope and slammed the door. 150,000 tons of premium American beef, already packaged and ready to go, rejected. And here's where it gets absolutely wild. Mexico swooped in and took the entire market within days. Not weeks, days. The same Mexico that American trade experts have been dismissing as second tier for decades just executed the smoothest market takeover I've ever seen. It was like watching someone get their job stolen in real time, except the job was worth over $1 billion and belonged to the world's supposed agricultural superpower. Look, I've built companies, I know what preparation looks like versus scrambling. And what Mexico did here. That was preparation. Years of it. While US policymakers were busy flexing at trade negotiations, Canada was quietly passing Bill C-20, literally designing an exit strategy from American agricultural dependence. Meanwhile, Mexico was upgrading everything. State-of-the-art inspection facilities, traceability systems that make US protocols look ancient, sanitary standards that meet European and Asian requirements. Strategic partnerships with Canadian distributors already locked in. So when Canada changed its beef import regulations overnight, supposedly as a routine sanitary update, US producers were blindsided. Literally couldn't comply. Trucks turned away at the Montana and North Dakota borders. Warehouses in Alberta told to halt all American shipments. But Mexico? Already compliant. Already approved. Already shipping. The timing was so perfect it's almost beautiful from a strategic standpoint. Canada rejects US beef on Monday. By Friday, Mexican beef is on Canadian shelves. No gaps. No shortages. Canadian consumers barely noticed the switch. American ranchers noticed everything. America didn't lose this market because Mexico cheated or Canada was unfair. America lost because it got complacent. The assumption was bulletproof. Canada needs our beef. Geography, history, NAFTA. They have no alternatives. Wrong. Dead wrong. That assumption led to aggressive moves. Unpredictable tariffs. Country of origin labeling restrictions that increased costs for Canadian importers. Policy swings tied to completely unrelated disputes about pipelines and environmental regulations. Washington treated food trade like a pressure point, and Canada, very quietly, decided, if our largest supplier sees food as a weapon, we need a new supplier. This is what happens when you assume you're irreplaceable. Someone replaces you. And get this, Mexico didn't even have to undercut on price. They won on reliability and standards. Let that sink in. The country US politicians mocked for sending low-quality produce just outcompeted America on quality and consistency. Here's what's actually terrifying about this situation. It's not about beef. It's about the precedent. If Canada, literally America's closest ally, sharing borders and defense treaties, can cut the US out of $1 billion industry this fast, what else is vulnerable? Pork, poultry, auto parts, semiconductors? The psychological shift is massive. For decades, the global rule was simple. America commands, world reacts. That's over. The new rule, America argues, world adapts around it. Canada isn't adapting anymore. It's leading. It's signing trade pacts that completely bypass Washington, building supply chains through Europe and Asia, coordinating logistics with Mexico to avoid US bottlenecks. Nations that used to be terrified of angering America are now openly choosing Ottawa as the safer, more predictable partner. Why? Because Canada offers something the US has completely forgotten how to provide: predictability. No election cycles that reset foreign policy every 4 years. No random tariff announcements via social media. Just stable, boring, reliable trade relationships. European companies are tired of US sanctions that change with administrations. Asian manufacturers want access to Western markets without Washington's political theatrics. So they're going through Canada. Mexico is now coordinating with Canada to avoid US interference entirely. America is standing at a crossroads right now, and most people in Washington don't even realize it. There are 3 possible futures. Path 1, Reformation. America accepts the wake-up call, stabilizes foreign policy, invests in actual manufacturing infrastructure instead of press releases, rebuilds trust with allies through consistent, reliable action. This path is painful, expensive, and requires admitting mistakes, but it leads back to leadership. Path 2, Resentment. Washington blames everyone else. Canada betrayed us. Mexico cheated. Globalization was a scam. Double down on tariffs. sanctions, threats, isolate, and assume the world will eventually come crawling back. Spoiler from history. They won't. This is decline disguised as patriotism. Path 3. Replacement. The US doesn't collapse. It just becomes one powerful nation among many. Global supply chains reorganize without American approval. Alliances evolve. Trade routes shift. The world moves forward without waiting for Washington to figure itself out. This path is already forming, quietly and confidently. Each path leads to a radically different version of America. Reformed, resented, or replaced. The tragedy is that nobody in power seems to understand they're standing on the edge of this choice, and the rest of the world has already started voting with their trade agreements. Behind closed doors in D.C., there's one terrifying question that policymakers won't say out loud. What if this time the world doesn't come back? For a century, America operated on a safety net of inevitability. Nations drifted away, they returned. Deals fell through, new ones emerged. Allies complained, Washington waited them out. But what happens when allies stop waiting? Canada's decision exposes the nightmare scenario. Global partners aren't acting like they need America anymore. They're building alternatives that function perfectly without U.S. involvement. Complete systems, full supply chains, strategic partnerships. And here's the part that should genuinely keep every policymaker awake. Once a nation learns it doesn't need you, it never forgets. This isn't about one beef deal. This is about the end of inevitability. Canada didn't destroy American dominance. It revealed the truth. The U.S. is losing influence not because others rose too fast, but because America assumed it would always be the default choice. That assumption is gone. The world has options now. Canada just proved it publicly. Look at the cascade effects already happening. U.S. manufacturing states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania are seeing contract cancellations ripple through their economies. Not just beef processors, but logistics firms, cold storage operators, packaging suppliers, transportation companies. Entire ecosystems built on the assumption that Canada was a locked-in customer. Meanwhile, Mexican agricultural zones are expanding capacity, hiring workers, building infrastructure. Canadian retailers are establishing long-term relationships with Mexican suppliers, the kind of relationships that become permanent. The global perception shift is even bigger. America's status as the world's economic center of gravity is being questioned not by enemies but by allies. The psychological contract that existed since World War II, where the U.S. was the assumed leader and everyone else followed, just broke. It wasn't broken by China, Russia, or some anti-Western coalition. It was broken by Canada, the country most intertwined with America culturally, economically, defensively. They looked at the long-term reliability of U.S. trade partnership and said, "No, you don't control our future anymore." That's the signal being watched worldwide. If Canada can walk away, who else might? First principle thinking here. What actually happened? America assumed its position was permanent, made decisions based on that assumption, treated allies like they had no alternatives. Turns out, they did have alternatives, and they found them. Solution? Stop assuming. Start earning. Provide value through reliability, quality, and consistent policy. Rebuild trust through actions, not rhetoric. Invest in actual competitive advantages, not just protection through tariffs. But that requires admitting the current approach isn't working. And based on what I'm seeing from DC, that admission isn't coming anytime soon. The world isn't waiting for America to figure this out. It's moving forward, building new systems, creating new partnerships. And the longer the U.S. delays adaptation, the more permanent those new arrangements become. This beef situation isn't the crisis. It's the warning. The question is whether anyone's actually listening. The dominoes are already falling. You just can't see them yet because mainstream media is too busy covering political theater to notice the actual geopolitical earthquake happening. Canada isn't stopping at beef. They're applying the same strategy to dairy, automotive parts, and energy infrastructure. Smart move, honestly. Why would they stop when the playbook just worked perfectly? Mexico's expanding this exact model to other sectors. They've already started upgrading poultry processing facilities with the same Canadian compliance standards. Pork is next on the list. And here's the kicker. Other countries are watching and taking notes. South Korea, Japan, EU nations. They're all seeing that you can build successful trade relationships that bypass American volatility. The blueprint is public now. Canada showed it works. Mexico proved it scales. Think about what this means for U.S. workers. Not just ranchers, but everyone in the supply chain. Transportation workers who move that beef. Cold storage operators, packaging plants, feed suppliers, equipment manufacturers, veterinary services, quality inspectors. When a $1.2 billion market vanishes overnight, it's not just one industry that bleeds, it's thousands of jobs across dozens of sectors. Meanwhile, those exact same jobs are being created in Mexico right now. New facilities, new workers, new expertise. And once that expertise is established, once those relationships are locked in, once Mexican producers prove they can deliver consistently, those jobs aren't coming back. Ever. The American political class keeps arguing about who's more patriotic while completely missing that patriotism without competitiveness is just cosplay. You can't tariff your way to dominance when your customers have found better alternatives. Let's run the numbers on what replaceable actually means. The U.S. agricultural export market is worth roughly $196 billion annually. Canada represents about $25 billion of that. If even 20% of Canadian agricultural imports shift away from the U.S. using this Mexico model, that's $5 billion gone. Per year. Every year. But it compounds. Because once supply chains reorganize, they don't reorganize back. The switching costs are too high. The relationships are established. The infrastructure is built. You'd need to be dramatically better and cheaper to win back a market you lost through unreliability. And we haven't even talked about the secondary effects. When Canada diversifies away from U.S. suppliers, American producers lose economy of scale. Costs go up, competitiveness goes down. Other markets become harder to service. It's a death spiral disguised as a trade dispute. The really crazy part, this was completely avoidable. All Washington had to do was treat Canada like a partner instead of a subordinate, provide consistent policy instead of random swings, compete on quality instead of assuming geographic proximity equals loyalty. But here we are. The U.S. just learned the hardest lesson in business. Your customers don't owe you anything, especially when you take them for granted. So which path is America actually taking? Based on current trajectory, it's looking like path 3. Replacement, not because it's chosen, but because it's the default when you refuse to choose reform and resentment doesn't work. The world is reorganizing. The question isn't whether America will be part of the new system. The question is whether it'll be leading it, participating in it, or watching it happen from the sidelines. Clock's ticking. And every day spent arguing instead of adapting is another day competitors get further ahead.